All right. Wait, one second. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Continental Club. Welcome to Grown Up Storytime 1. Sorry, let me back up. Grown Up Scary Time. 151. My name is Blair. I am one of the producers of Grown Up Storytime. Emily Hines, who's one of our founders, she's in Florida right now. Sometimes we go to Florida. I don't know, for family, apparently. I have no reason to go to Florida otherwise, but so she can't be here, but perhaps she, as well as some of our other viewers, are on the live stream. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm waving to them, waving the live stream. Hopefully that this works. Yeah, so Grown Up Storytime, I left my notes on my phone, so give me one moment. I've been doing this a while, as you can tell.
You're doing great.
Well, thank you. All right, yes. Okay, we have a stream. There's no Emily. Okay, here's how this works. Grown Up Storytime. Do we have anybody who hasn't been to Grown Up Storytime in the audience? Can you give me a little whoop? Okay, very good. Welcome. Here's what's going on. We have people from the community, not professional writers necessarily, but they send us stories. We currently workshop them with you online, and then we find readers. And so the people who are up on stage, it's not their story, but they sure are reading the hell out of it. So because this is a live performance, this is my general reminder to be really cool about your phones. Yeah, sure, they're for taking photos, but they are not for like hanging out on, or like, I don't know, actually taking a phone call in a performance. You would never do that. So just remember, there is no actual screen here. We can hear you, although this microphone is actually fantastic. Cool. So that is that. Oh, we have programs. If you haven't gotten one, they are on the bar or they are around. There's a QR code in the program. We've been struggling on this, like getting to 1,000 YouTube followers, but it's been a year now that we've been in the last 50. It's its own ghost story in a way. So if you do have a friend who has a YouTube account or has a Gmail, just have them subscribe. The QR code is there. If we get to 1,000 followers, this whole live stream setup is a lot easier for me. And then apparently we also get bumped up, according to YouTube, into the internet. So that's why we're trying to get to 1,000. We're like 20 away. So close. So close. Workshops. So we've been struggling because we were just trying to get the show up, but now we are finally getting some workshops together. We will have a writing workshop. It is scheduled. And we're gonna post this on our Instagram, on our Facebook. It's not in the program because it wasn't confirmed by that point. But our writing workshop is gonna be November 12th. It's a Saturday. We're gonna have it at 2 p.m. It's gonna be at the boardroom, which is in Finn Hall, right off the rail. So we'll have all the information there. They are free. You don't have to be a person who's ever written a thing in your life. You could come, please at least know how to make sentences. I guess I should throw that out there. Yes, I'm an English teacher. Don't make me have flashbacks. But we will walk you through how to do a Grown Up Storytime story. So that'll be, again, November 12th. It's a Saturday. It'll be at 2 p.m. right down the rail. And you can email us for all the other things. We will have readers workshops eventually, but our email is grownupstorytimehouston@gmail.com. So if you already have a story you've been thinking about, you just want to put in front of someone, please send us your things. I'm actually getting way better at checking the email to now that I love checking the email. So Emily checks the email. She's much better at it. Okay, microphone. We had a really good suggestion last time that the microphone tutorial for all our readers who haven't been up on the stage yet, because we have readers who have been reading with us for years, but they've never read up here. So just a reminder, yes, there are cobwebs, but you unscrew this for all of my taller people, okay, and also for my shorter people. Okay, so there is a way of making sure that the microphone is close to you. And Neo Benchi is we used to be one of our like kind of partner organizations or partner performances, and they have now moved two doors down. So they are in the program, but if you had a great time here, you're gonna have just as great a time, if not, I don't know, more hilarious all the time, better at Big Top, and that's next Wednesday on the 26th. That's off my top of my head. Okay. We are about to perform, and look, all the people came in. Look, sometimes this is just like buying everybody parking time. We have a guest producer tonight, so we started this guest producer program during the pandemic. Emily and I realized, like, you know what? We need to shake things up. We've been producing this for a while. We need fresh eyes on everything, fresh brains on how to think about things. So your host tonight is also our guest producer. His name is Binav Kumar. He's very funny man. Lots of jokes. You know what? I'm going to stop talking and just turn it over to him. Give it up for your host, Binav!
What? I'm just kidding. Hey, welcome to Grown Up Storytime 151. But this time, as Blair said, it's going to be Grown Up Scary Time. I'm your host for the evening, and my name is, I can't pronounce that. What am I dressed up as? White college Spider-Man? No. I'm dressed up as nothing. Nothing. Nothing was here long before all of you, and nothing will be here after all of you have left. Nothing has never looked this good, by the way. Nothing has looked a lot worse also. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'll be introducing the stories, and in my travels I picked up some words and I'm going to share them with you all, but let's get this started. The first story of the night is The Haunted House, written by Sarah Yates and read by Christina Brown.
All right. The Haunted House by Sarah Yates. One day in October, I was sitting at a coffee shop in the Heights, minding my own business, swiping left on Tinder, when the barista, a good friend of mine, handed me a ticket to a haunted house. He mentioned that a customer had dropped off a few tickets as a gift when they had purchased coffee and asked if I wanted to attend the event that was happening the upcoming weekend. I looked at the ticket, intrigued. I'd never been to a haunted house, so I had no idea what a ticket to one would look like, but this particular ticket was spooky. It was professionally printed and had a photo of one of those killer clowns. The image alone had me hooked. I was ready to be spooked. My friend had been given 4 tickets, so 2 other friends joined us and we all rode together. The location of the haunted house was just north of 610 and Yale Street in an abandoned warehouse. We parked a few blocks down from the building where we felt assured no one would give us a ticket and walked over to the venue. When we arrived, there were about 20 people waiting in line and there was scary music playing on some loudspeakers. The outside of the building was adorned with floating heads and skeletons and spider webs. All 4 of us us were excited about what was to come. We spoke to each other about having few expectations as to what was in store, other than knowing that people at the haunted houses could scare us, but they couldn't grab or touch us. We all wondered to each other, though, about whether or not the scary people inside the building we were in line for would adhere to the rules of no contact. After a while of waiting in line, we were slowly ushered into the darkness of the warehouse. The four of us were brought into the first part of the haunted house and encouraged by some of the staff to sit in the seats provided. From what I can remember, that initial section was hella dark. I was in close proximity to my friends, but had no idea how many people were in the room or how big the room was. There were sounds of a fog machine, oohs and ahs of ghosts and other inaudible noises adding to an ambiance of fear. Within a couple minutes, though, all of that would change. A bright red light appeared overhead to reveal the amount of people sitting with us, the outline of the room, and an uneasiness of what was to come. Next thing we knew, a large man came rushing into the room in front of those who were seated, dressed as a devil. Not just any devil, the devil. He had the long red cape, giant red horns, and a tall black pitchfork. We were trapped. We had been suckered into a gospel show, one of those hellfire and brimstone types. The show was extremely a la that 2022 unauthorized production of Hamilton that the horrible church in South Texas put on earlier this year. This production that we were witnessing was terrible. It included someone being put in a jail cell by the devil, while the devil walked around the room whipping a giant whip in direction of the audience. As a surprise to no one, the devil was succumbed by a mystery man in white who broke past the devil and set the person in jail free. Now, look, could I have gotten up to leave at any point during this performance? Yes. Was I afraid to get up and leave due to social anxiety? Also yes. Did a small part of me want to wait and see what would happen if I stayed until the end? Absolutely yes. After the actor playing Jesus saved the person in jail, the devil took off his horns and spoke to the audience in a soft tone about how the path away from eternal damnation is saying the sinner's prayer and confessing all of the bad things you have ever done. The terrible bright red lighting was then turned off and substituted with fluorescent lighting, while the cast of the performance walked out of the room and those in the audience stood up. After standing up and attempting to process what had just been subjected upon me, I unknowingly turned around and made eye contact with the woman behind me. This woman, who was unsurprisingly accompanied by multiple small children, asked if I wanted to learn more about Jesus. I blurted out, "No," with every fiber of my being, and followed my dear friends out of the venue towards the car. We made it to the car and let out the laughter that all of us had been holding in for the past 30 minutes. We chatted about how none of what had just happened could have been imagined with looking at that scary murder plan on the ticket. We were then approached by a woman in her mid-20s, early 30s, who approached us on the street next to the car. She firmly expressed that this was not a joke and that Jesus saved her from the addiction to hard drugs and that she is now blessed by the light of the Lord. The four of us were so taken aback by this woman's aggressiveness and unawareness of our situation. My friend kindly told her that we all knew very well about Jesus and that two of us worked in the church in town. Thankfully, she only mentioned one more thing about Jesus and walked away into the darkness of that weird, cold, strange October night. Y'all, this has been the story of how I went to a haunted house and was forced into accepting Jesus into my heart. Thank you very much.
Wow, one more time for Christina and Sarah, please. Yes. Okay, as Blair mentioned, first of all, no one gave me feedback and said that my original appearance was little too intense, so hopefully this helps. This show, as Blair said, is put on by Emily and Blair, and along with a lot of other people in the past, they've done this 151 times. That's 12 and a half. If this show was a human, it would be old enough to go and trick or treat. This show is as old as Jackson Bieber. And if you don't know who that is, that's awesome. Sadly, Emily is no longer with us for now. Is that Emily? So I wanted to try something with you, if you don't mind. On the count of 3, we're recording, right? Okay. On the count of 3, and you're like, take all your anxiety, all your road rage, all the near deaths that you've had on the streets. And on the count of 3, just say, "Hi, Emily." Ready? 1, boo. 3. Holy shit. I just hope she can hear us all the way down there in Florida. Okay, the next story is written by Emily. It's called Halloween, and it's read by Cody Dale Edgar.
My least favorite holiday is Halloween! And a lot of my friends give me shit about this. I looked up some definitions of Halloween. Here's one: the evening of October 31st. The eve of All Saints' Day. Okay. Observed especially by children in costumes who solicit treats. Often by threatening minor pranks. The wording is hilarious to me. "Give me candy or I will poop in your potted plants, Mrs. Robinson. Give me candy or I'm going to write 'you suck' in chalk on your sidewalk so everyone knows." I have never had a particularly bad Halloween. When I was a kid, I loved playing dress up, and I still have some of the clothes I played around in back then in my nostalgia box. At some point in middle or high school, I decided that it was not cool anymore to get dressed up and goof off. I wish I could go back in time and tell my little teenage self to shut up and enjoy that stuff forever, but I can't. My friends love Halloween. Tell me one reason they like it is because you get to dress up and pretend to be someone you aren't and do things that you normally wouldn't do, which is not appealing to me. I don't want to dress up as something else and use it as an excuse to get wasted and have a make-out session with a dude I don't know dressed up as Austin Powers. I don't like how easy it is to go to the store and buy a shitty costume. I don't like that as an okay thing to do culturally. Where's your sense of craftsmanship? I also don't like candy. There, I said it, no one needs that much candy. Another thing that comes between Halloween and me: I don't like being scared. I don't like watching scary movies. I don't like going to haunted houses. I get anxiety just thinking about going in my creepy backyard after dark. There are bugs and rats back there. I know this to be true because I've seen them with my own eyeballs. The concept of wanting to be scared is so foreign to me, but also so ingrained in the culture of Halloween, we just don't get along. It seems I am the person who doesn't like Halloween, A, because of capitalism. B, because sugar is poison. C, I am a sissy. As I get older, I have reluctantly grown a little fonder of this holiday. I just can't help myself. There are some things about Halloween that I do like. Carving pumpkins is awesome and fun. My clever friends who make their own badass costumes, little kids dressed up as cute. People who dress up their pets are the best. I want to order a shrimp costume for my dog. I also like Halloween history. If someone wanted to celebrate Samhain, the end of summer Celtic holiday where we set an extra place at the table because our dead relatives are coming to visit, and where you party because it's the end of the harvest season and the darker times, aka winter, is on its way, I might be into that. Oh, and seeing those costumed walk of shames the next morning, it's great. Nothing like watching a dude dressed up as a pirate mope home with last night's eye makeup running down his face while holding his wig in one hand and his fake hook hand in the other hand. Party on, dude.
There are a lot of scary times throughout the day. One of the scariest is in the morning, right when you wake up. Your whole to-do list is just hanging over your head. Sometimes the best thing to do is get with your family and start it off right. Up out of bed about the break of day, I run down the stairs to hear my mother say, she says, "Don't you miss your breakfast now? Don't be late." But I know what to do. I don't hesitate. I run to the cupboard and I open up the door and I grab a bunch of boxes that I grabbed before. Now everyone's a favorite. How do I decide? Here's a little rap I call my cereal guide. It goes snap, crack, snap, crackle, pop. Snap, crack, snap, crackle, pop. Sugar, sugar, Cocoa Puffs. I can't seem to get enough. Tricks, kicks, mucilex, body aches, and alphabets. Captain Crunch, lunch, munch, Cocoa Pebbles by the bunch. Cheer, cheer, Cheerios. And don't forget the Wheaties. Snap, crack, snap, crackle, pop. I frown on hash browns and marmalade. I want some goddamn whole grain goodness in my bowl. Crispy and crunchy and ready to go. 2 scoops of raisins on the side. Scoop them up. Tastes so fine. Now I'm as happy as can be, and so is Mommy. Because I love cereal, and it loves me. The next story is Wicked Peaks, written by Brendan Borg-Shield and read by Andrew Barrett. Let's give it up!
Good evening. Wicked Geek by Brendan Borg-Shield. When I was 18 and just about to move out of my mom's apartment for college, we started hearing knocking sounds in the walls every night. It would wake us up around 3 a.m. We'd trace it to my mom's closet. We'd open the closet door and the knock would fade to silence. The morning after night number 3 of this, my mom said with a little excitement, "I think we have a ghost." This was not at all out of the realm of normal stuff for her to say. Mom was a witch. She was part of a coven in the 80s during the heyday of Dianic Wicca, but after 30-ish years apart from the coven, she'd spun out into her own idiosyncratic belief system. She would tell stories about conversations she had with trees and fairies and prehistoric humans. And half of these stories happened while she was high on MDMA, and in her mind, that made them more credible, not less. She watched shows like Crossing Over, The Dead Files, Kindred Spirits, and Long Island Medium, and believed in them more than she believed in the news. Ghosts were not only real to her, they were like most of her personality. In my mom's eyes, you are all just a bunch of pre-ghosts waiting to hatch in some dark trench of the Dead Sea that is existence. So, as far as she was concerned, there was no other explanation for the sound in the walls. It was a ghost knocking, and it was going to keep knocking until we answer the metaphysical door. So, that evening, around sunset, she asked me to join her in the living room for a ritual. We cleansed the space by lighting candles and spreading salt water. We cast a circle, which basically means calling on different guardian spirits to protect and focus your magical work. I had a mixed bag of feelings about the whole thing. When I'd been younger, I used to hang on to every word of my mom's ghost stories. And while I'd done solstice and equinox rituals with her before, this was my first time being invited to participate in a ghost encounter. So the little kid in me was pretty stoked. But at some point, I'd hit the teenage rebellion phase, and when your mom's hippy-dippy counterculture radical, the only direction you have to go is to become a wet blanket skeptic. So I'd spent the last 4 years kind of being the Agent Scully to her Mulder. And this whole seance bothered me on principle. Still, I stuck with it. Curious to see how it would all play out and whether I'd gotten the ghost whisperer gene or not. If you're picturing what we're doing here, some sort of kind of exorcism, that really wasn't the mood. It was more like an intervention. We would listen to the ghost, then tell it how it was making us feel, and end with a firm but loving ultimatum. In Mom's ghost stories, the ghost always leaves in peace. So, there we are. Circle cast. Waiting in silence. During which thought, I thought we were supposed to be meditating, maybe dialing in some spiritual wavelength where you're able to discourse with the dead. But then suddenly, my mom was like, yeah, okay. The way you would in the middle of listening to somebody talk, and I realized, oh shit, the ghost is already here. They started without me. And I tried harder to concentrate and see if I could get some clairvoyant flash of revelation, but I was getting nothing. Except the occasional, yeah, from my mom. From my end, it felt like babysitting someone on LSD. Like, here was Mom right next to me having this vivid experience all to herself, and maybe it was the feeling of exclusion that set me over the edge, where I started lightly heckling the seance. Every time Mom would say, I would tag onto it something like, yes, quite so. My mom, probably in an effort to politely shut me up, let me in on what she was seeing. A little girl in a pinafore dress. The girl, Mom told me, kept saying she was lost on the way to a very important, very exciting party. And I'm not proud of this because it was disrespectful and not even a good burn, but I said, little girl ghost, little cliche. I don't remember it going on much longer. Within a couple minutes, whatever conversation my mom and the ghost were having had reached the point where Mom was saying stuff like, I hear you. I accept you, but now it's time to move on. She gently said a couple different versions of that message, and then I could tell by watching her whatever conversation she was having had ended, and whoever she was talking to, real or imagined, was gone. And it was just us, again, both kind of annoyed at each other. And that night, there was no more knocking sound. We never heard it again. Which I hate so much, but I was at least glad to be done with the whole thing, or so I thought. Cut to 8 years later, and sorry in advance because this is where the story takes a turn from lighthearted ghost romp to something a little heavier. I'm 26 at this point, and my mom has recently died. Going through her old stuff, I turn on her computer and find that she was writing a book. It's sort of half memoir, half essays about her spiritual beliefs. There's a chapter about her coven and one about prehistorical aliens, and there's a chapter on this little girl ghost she talked to back when I was 18. But in this manuscript, she added in some details that she hadn't shared with me on the night it happened. Mom's book says that about halfway through the seance, she realized that little girl was her mother, like an innocent childhood piece of her mother. And in that moment, I read that I knew whether there was really a ghost or not, this event had been a way bigger deal than I realized. It would be way too much to get into my mom's whole relationship with her mother, who I will simply call Anne because I definitely never call her grandma. But just to give you a sense of their dynamic, my mom had this incredibly strong startle response. For her entire life, if you walked into a room and she didn't see you coming, there was literally no way to alert her to your presence and without making her jump. And the reason for her fight or flight had such a hair trigger is because of things that were done to her by Anne. Long before Anne died, she haunted my mom. Anne was probably a big part of why she believed in ghosts in the first place. The way Mom put it in her book was that seeing the little girl helped her remember Anne wasn't always a bad person. That somewhere early in Anne's life, some things happened to her and she got stuck. And now, in the afterlife, Anne was finally unstuck and she got to start over as a little kid again. And my mom was able to feel happy for her in that moment. I did the math and I realized this episode with the knocking sound of the ghost happened 6 months after Anne died. I've heard for a lot of people, grief reaches its peak at 6 months. And if that's what Mom's peak of grieving Anne, if that was Mom's peak of grieving Anne, I have to acknowledge it was a pretty wicked peak. And look, if you ask me, do you really think there was a little kid knocking on the walls? I don't fucking know. I tend to doubt it. But I do really think Mom saved herself hours of therapy with that ritual. Imagine the next time your past came knocking, keeping you up at night, you could just light some candles, have a conversation with it, and then ask it to leave, and it actually would. Whether ghosts are real or not, I think that qualifies as magic.
I know I said I'm nothing. And I exist outside of space and time, and human life has been a blip in the cosmos, or whatever. But you know what's really scary? I've been watching the news for like 400 years. And it's always something like, this just in, breaking news. The savages are headed for our shores. They're gonna eat our babies, I'm sure. They've got spears and knives and they want to take our lives. The savages are knocking at your door. Oh shit, this just in. Breaking news. The immigrants are headed for our shores. They're gonna eat our babies, I'm sure. They speak another tongue and they want to see us hung. The immigrants are knocking at your door. Oh shit, this just in. Breaking news. The communists are headed for our shores. They're gonna eat our babies, I'm sure. Their color is red and they want us all dead. The communists are knocking at your doors. Oh shit, breaking news. This just in. The terrorists are headed for our shores. They're gonna eat our babies, I'm sure. They could live next door. or under your floor, the terrorists are knocking at our door. It's just in. Breaking news. The aliens, they're coming from the sky. The aliens, they want us all to die. The aliens, they're coming from on high. Now we can change your state of mind. Tune in, and you will find that when you're afraid, we'll show you the way. And when you're afraid, you'll do exactly what we tell you to do. The next story. The next story is Aha! The Brown Kid's a Terrorist. Written by Rishi Bhattacharya and read by Rahul Rao.
What's good? What's good?
Oh, what's up, nerds? Okay, we've been listening to a lot of scary stuff tonight, but you guys know the scariest thing of all. That's right, racism. Here we go. Within 4 days of Putin's attack on Ukraine, the EU had admitted 400,000 refugees from Ukraine. It's drafting permits to accept millions more, and by the time you're hearing this story, the US is changing immigration laws to accept 100,000 Ukrainian refugees. In the 10 years and counting span of the Syrian humanitarian crisis, where millions are fleeing the country's civil war, the EU has accepted 1 million and the US 30,000 Syrian refugees. I'm sure they're very serious. 1 month, 500,000 Ukrainian refugees. 10 years, 1 million Syrian refugees. However, the following story isn't meant to point out racial hypocrisies in the face of geopolitical crises, a very common subject in grown-up story time. No, what the story is instead are some personal experience I've been ruminating on as I see events unfold in the world. I tend to analyze larger events by drawing from smaller personal events, and I hope you will humor me and the person reading this to you by pretending to enjoy the experience. Have some more confidence, Bo. My parents are from India, but I was born and raised my entire life in Michigan. Where I grew up, there wasn't a lot of racial diversity. For example, I was one of 5 non-white children in my entire elementary school. Despite this, throughout most of my primary school years, I never thought that I was being treated differently and race wasn't a large part of my daily thinking. I tend to think most people don't wake up thinking about race. Most people are simply experiencing the rhythms of their day-to-day routines. Anyone can relate to that. It's just sometimes conflicts come up, and when a person reacts, they're probably not considering how subtly their perceptions of race have played into their decision-making. Conflicts such as the ones that stemmed from the aftermath of the terrorist attacks on 9/11. I was 13 when it happened. It was the last year of middle school. Perhaps it's because of my being more mature at the time, but it's in the national reaction to 9/11 where I think I started feeling race a lot more in my life. If you're not a millennial or older, and your skin isn't of a curry brown hue, I don't like saying that, you may not recall that post 9/11, some Americans were expressing anger towards brown people that looked almost like those ragheads or those camel jockeys. These terms are almost quaint now to look back on, however at the time it felt really scary to have these aimed at me from fellow students. But many students get accustomed to shrugging off the dumb things kids say. What's harder to shrug off is when it comes from a teacher. Mrs. H, as we will call her, was my middle school English teacher, and in retrospect, I don't know why I was surprised to get a racist comment from her. She looks like if a Kid Rock concert decided to become a middle school English teacher. Besides having a teaching degree, Mrs. H also had the distinction of being one of the few teachers that were impervious to my charms. I don't know how you survived school, but my main strategy mostly relied on using charisma and being a lovable rascal in class. My lovable rascal strategy involves kind of doing homework, and saying a lot of nice and smart things to suck up to the teachers, and then by sliding by with average grades. And most of the teachers were down with this, all but Mrs. H. But, you know, she's my teacher, what am I to do besides remain persistent? After the unfortunate events of 9/11 happened, there's an odd sense of hesitation and mysterious fear amongst the kids in the middle school. On the day of, school management decided not to talk officially about the bomb, so they wouldn't freak everyone out. However, everyone knew something was going on, so everyone freaked out anyways. In the days following, some teachers decided to talk about it if the students wanted to, and this included Mrs. H. Somehow, the question of why the terrorists would want to do something so awful came up, and I, wielding a recently discovered interest in the news, offered some suggestions. A couple of other students and I had a bit of a back and forth, and someone brought up a point I hadn't considered before, so I said, aha. In my memory, the point had something to do with how maybe the average American couldn't logic why someone would want to do something so terrible because the terrorists were from an area so unlike our own. But the rest of the class and the rest of the day carried on without anything of interest. I finished school, go back home, watch cartoons. I might have masturbated before bed if you're really pushing for details. I was not. Cut to the following day. I am surprised to find out that I'm asked to the counselor's office. From recent memory, I have no idea what it could be for, so as I walk to the counselor's office, my mind is racing through the Rolodex of past crimes. Did they find I had etched my initials into the corner of the lunch tables? Did the country recently make it a crime to spend more time playing Pokemon than chasing girls? The heat is building as I enter the office, but when the counselor tells me what it's for, it's like a splash of ice water. I wasn't expecting it at all. Remember, when I had said, aha, mid-9/11 discussion in Mrs. H's class, without any idea, Mrs. H had perceived this as noteworthy. It turns out she had reported me to the office. Miss H was concerned that when I said, aha, that this wasn't an explanation of intellectual stimulus, but rather I was expressing delight about 9/11 and what terrorists had done. The counselor had a brief conversation with me, confirmed based off my shock that I was unlikely to be a disciple of Osama bin Laden, took me to have a very awkward conversation with Mrs. H, where she very awkwardly defended herself, and then I was left to wonder what the heck had just happened. As I reflect back on this conflict and on subsequent conversations I had with Mrs. H, I realized what the heck had just happened was that in some ways, Mrs. H felt that I was challenging her power with my lovable rascal strategy. Leading up to this incident, we didn't really have a great relationship, so her reaction to this was to seize an opportunity to show her power, whatever the cost. If today I were to go to the effort of confronting Mrs. H about this, scanning the crowd for her at, let's say, a local Kid Rock concert, I'm sure she wouldn't remember this incident at all. For me, I was a kid in a conflict with an adult who is my teacher, and they used their power to resolve our conflict in a way that leveraged their being the majority race and mine being the race of the minority group. At the end of the day, I still don't think people wake up thinking about how they're going to leverage race. But when you're in the heat of a conflict, any resolution that gets you back to your regular day-to-day can feel great. Whether it's pointing out the race of the brown kid, or whether it's stonewalling millions of Syrian refugees for over a decade. So while I sympathize with the Western world's efforts to support Ukrainian refugees, I can't help but wondering if there aren't multiple Mrs. H's controlling the gate at a border, arbitrarily determining who can come in and who needs to be taught a lesson.
Oh, damn. I know it's been getting dark and scary and whatever, but I really hope everybody's having a good time. All right. Well, if you've heard some of the people up here and heard their words, the other people's words, and you think, hey, I know how to write, I know how to read, I know how to talk, I can stand, or sit, or lie down, get in touch with us. Maybe we'll see what can happen next time. The next story. The next story is The Shadows Hide Monsters, written by Tariq Beluche and read by Black Cassidy.
Hi. Come with me. This will be the first time that I've shared this story since it happened 8 years ago. I have some theories on what I saw that night, but none of them can provide any closure. The universe is indifferent to our suffering. It happened in early August of 2014, but for context, I must start at the beginning of the summer. I had broken up with my girlfriend in April, and my best friend, Francine, broken up with her boyfriend a month later in May. We were both crushed and sullen, so we made a pact that summer to throw the best pity party ever. Just two young millennial hipsters getting totally trashed for 3 months. To give you an idea, we would order tequila, well shots, with some orange slices, and we would chase them down with some Schlitz. Yeah, we had it that bad. Now, we never saw each other romantically. We had more of a brother-sister relationship where we would cover for one another when one of us would get in trouble, that sort of thing. Anyway, looking back, despite our mutual melancholy, it was actually the best summer of my life. Between drowning our sorrows in cheap liquor, we saw a lot of great shows, participated in some fun projects, and met some amazing people. It's probably here that I should mention Piggy. She was a large blue pit bull that looked scary as hell, but was just the sweetest thing. Francine had her ever since she popped out of the womb and would say that she was the only good thing that came out of her last relationship. Her name, Piggy, has a dual meaning. She used to snort, and when she was a puppy, and she ate more than her litter mates, contributing to her hefty build. August had arrived, and one evening, Francine called me up with a bright idea to go camping in the beach that same night. Come on, it'll be fun, she pleaded. I've got hot dogs. I'll bring the beer, bring the weed if you bring the beer. And I know you have a tent ready to go since you're into camping. She was right. I loved camping, and it all sounded pretty sweet. It was just such short notice for that type of thing. Fuck it. Why not? Yay, this is going to be so much fun. I would regret that decision for the rest of my natural life. The drive felt surreal. Not saying I didn't do anything like that before, it just felt out of the ordinary. And it was all in reverse. Normally, we all go out at the beginning of the season in the morning so that we would be there all day. On this particular occasion, it was just me, my friend, and her dog going at the end of the season in the middle of the night. Whatever nerves I had, I bottled them up and thought about how exciting it all was. We were going to end our summer with a bang, both figuratively and literally. Francine had brought along some M80s and Black Cats just to spice things up. It did feel a bit spooky pulling up to the beach. None of the houses had any lights on since they were rentals and it was the end of the season. I think we were the only two around for miles. The only source of light was a perfect crescent moon and the dim glow of some industrial lights from some oil refineries in the distance. Before we set up, I just had to look at the water. I couldn't see where the sky ended and the sea began. The horizon was so dark, it just bled together, creating a black void. It reminded me of a quote by Nietzsche. "Battle not with monsters, lest ye become a monster. And if you gaze into the abyss gazes into you." Everything was going better than planned. We had the beach to ourselves, getting buzzed and stoned around a crackling fire. We laughed as we reflected on our few months together. I scratched Piggy's belly and remarked about how our whole setup looked like the first scene from Jaws. "No swimming for us tonight," she quipped. The fire died down and we'd had our fill of hot dogs and booze and setting off the 180s and some trash cans before calling it a night. The last thing that I heard before dozing off was the sound of crashing waves. All seemed right with the world and I felt content. Sometime later, Francine shook me awake, whispering my name in a frantic panic. "Eric, there's a man outside of our tent." Hung over, I looked around. It was still dark out. I couldn't see the details in Francine's face, but I could sense that she was terrified. Piggy was still laying down, but stiff and fixated on whoever was outside. Francine motioned to me at an opening she had made in the zipper covering the window. I got up and I peeked through the opening. It was unsettlingly dark out. I strained my eyes to see a huge man, 30 feet or so from our tent. He stood motionless, staring in our direction. "How long has he been standing there?" I whispered to Francine. "A few minutes," she muttered. Everything was eerily still and quiet. Even the waves weren't as loud as they were earlier. A few more minutes had passed, and the man continued to just stand there. What the fuck is up with this guy? I thought to myself. Had he been watching us all night? I took my eyes off of him for a second to look over at Francine and Piggy. I darted my eyes back at the people as soon as the dog stood up, and the man was now 10 feet from our tent. Francine covered her mouth, covering up a whimper, and Piggy started growling. Not only was he unbelievably fast, but this motherfucker was huge. He had to be at least 6'8", if not 7 feet tall, and that wasn't even the strangest thing about him. He was freakishly wide, like a foot shy of being square wide. This is so fucked, I stammered. How the hell can someone that big cover the distance that fast in fucking sand? Francine's eyes were welling up. We had to think of something before this Michael Myers on steroids had his way with us. I looked over at Piggy and I saw that she was ready to tussle with this bastard if he tried anything. I brought a bat for just such an occasion. Then I left the pepper spray in the car like a dumbass. I turned to Christine. Francine. Me and Piggy, we're gonna go up first. We're gonna try to scare this bastard away. If not, we should at least distract him long enough for you to get to the car and go find help. And there's mace in the glove box if he comes your way. Francine, holding back tears, nodded her head. Got it. With a bat in one hand and Piggy in the other, I looked back at Francine to see if she was ready. She nodded her head again, signaling that she was. Now, when I said that Piggy was a large dog, I meant that she's a bulky 120 pounds of pure bully. I barely got that flap halfway open before that crazy bitch leaped out into the night, almost taking my arm with her. I spill out, face plant, into the sand. Piggy was off her leash and thundering toward this giant man as I'm scrambling up, mustering up as much machismo as I can. I start belting out curses and obscenities in my pathetic attempt to intimidate him. I heard Piggy barking, but I couldn't see them. Her barks faded further down the beach. I looked back at Francine as she's fumbling with the car. I paused for a moment at the ready for anything. Once I saw her get into the car, I decided I should go and find Piggy. Plus, I knew this guy was fast, so I needed to buy some time for Francine to drive away. Not the smartest plan in hindsight, but I was having an adrenaline rush, and I was worried about our dog on top of that. I trotted down the beach, hoping to find Piggy. She had stopped barking, so I assumed the man had gotten the hell out of Dodge while Piggy was out wandering around. I called to her, but she didn't come. I was passing an old beach house that looked like it was abandoned. It appeared to be condemned with some flotsam around its pilings. I was going to ignore it before I heard a whimper coming from up the stairs. At that moment, I didn't care how big and scary this asshole was. I had to save Piggy. I went up the stairs, but it didn't matter how tenderly I treaded. Each step released a creaking moan, and I made it to the patio, and a chill ran down my spine while every hair stood on end when I approached that threshold. There was no door, as it had rotted off its hinges long ago, leaving a black hole in its place. Every one of my primal instincts was ringing alarms not to go into that house. In that moment, Piggy let out a yelp. She was clearly in trouble now, and I had to do something. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and I crept into that house. It felt as if I was being swallowed by a giant beast. The air was significantly more humid than it was outside. The house itself was pretty sparse, consisting of just some old broken furniture. Everything was rotting and covered in mold. Suddenly, the most wretched smell invaded my senses. Saying it smelled like rotting fish at low tide would be putting it mildly. It smelled more like Poseidon's diarrhea after a crawfish festival. I gagged and nearly puked, but I had to press on. Roaches scattered wherever I pointed my light, and that's when I noticed something peculiar. A large, tattered trench coat was lying in the middle of the hall like someone had peeled it off after a long day at work. And what was stranger was that it was covered in a mucousy slime around the collar and throughout its interior. I heard a shuffle followed by a soft whimper coming from the next room. The smell grew stronger as I began to hear squishing noises. Nothing on this earth could have prepared me for what I saw when I turned the corner into the next room. I walked in just as the light left Piggy's eyes. I shuddered at the sight of an enormous creature eating her. Its mandibles pulled her apart while fleshy tubes sucked the muscle from her bones. This fucking thing was a goddamn abomination! The best way to describe it is that it was like a cross between a sea urchin and a tarantula, completely covered in spines and quills. It was tar black with a purple sheen and no eyes. I felt nauseated and a deep sense of dread consumed me. The reek of this thing had completely blown out my olfactory senses. At first, it wasn't bothered by my presence, but as it finished feasting, it quivered its spines as it motioned towards me. Though it looked like an arthropod in appearance, it moved like a cephalopod. Is this how I die? I thought to myself. Being eaten alive by some eldritch monster. As time slowed down around me, I remembered that I had slipped some black cats into my pocket earlier. I was planning to prank Francine with them that morning. I took a gamble. I placed the bat down. Where am I? The creature was moving inches as to not to spook its prey. I slowly drew the firecrackers from my pocket and swapped my phone for a lighter in my other pocket. When I struck the lighter, the creature had moved significantly closer, but still far enough so that I could get some distance before executing my plan. I muttered a prayer before lighting it up. As soon as the fuse sparked, I chucked it at that ugly fuck's face and I bolted down that hall. I remember hearing the successive popping of the black cats followed by an ear-piercing screech. Ah! I flew out of that house like a goddamn bat out of hell jumping off the patio and dropping 10 feet to the ground before tucking and rolling. As I ran for my life, the creature stumbled out of the house. I'm not sure of its motivations, but it didn't pursue me. I heard splashing, so I turned around, only to see the creature disappear beneath the waves. The rest is a blur. From Christine's account, the cops found me staggering down the road from the beach entrance. They said I was clammy and pale as a sheep with a 1,000-yard stare. At first, they assumed I was on something until they recognized the face of a man in shock. I didn't tell them the real story. I just said some crazy drifter killed our dog. After all, who would believe me? I was visited by a detective around 2 months after the incident. He knew I was hiding something and tried to cajole me into telling him the real story. Like I said, I have some theories. As much as I just want to forget about what happened, the trauma feels baked into my core now. Maybe if enough people know, others who saw what I've seen would come forward. If there's any wisdom to be taken from my experience, it's this. Keep an open mind and tread carefully. You never know what lurks in the shadows.
Okay, it's intermission time. If you've got demons, the bathroom's over there. If you've got other kinds of demons, the bar's right there. Tip well or go to hell. Yes! Hey, what's up, man? I'll see you back in 10 minutes. Oh, there's some amazing merch in the back room, too. Wow. Okay. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Hey, if anybody's in the bathroom and you can hear me, take your time. Okay, I wanted to do this for fun. We are in the second act of the show. Woo! I wonder if this is going to show up. So, if y'all want to huddle in for a beautiful memory. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay. And now just for candid. All right, everybody, welcome back. The next story is Entropy, written by William D. Hesser and read by Adam Scott, not from Parks and Rec.
Hi. Entropy by William D. Hesser. I moved out of my parents' house when I was 19, never looked back, no offense to them. My first apartment was behind that badass old diner, Mama's Cafe on West Highland. Of course, it's gone now. Then into my ex's shitty little garage apartment. And then my buddy's place on Houston Avenue. It's gone now too. Then a really nice duplex across from a dog park in the Heights. Should never have left that one. Then I moved in with a good buddy in near Northside, and we became really codependent, and it was a whole fucking thing. We're still friends now, somehow, fortunately. After that, I moved to the East End and gave love a chance for a bit. I ended up living like 4 other places since then, but I'm gonna pause here at my first house in the East End. It was on McKinney Street, across from an elementary school. It was pink. Right next to it was a baby blue house that was very similar, cool and old. High ceilings, no garage, no proper driveway. The story was, both of these houses were moved to Eastwood from the Heights. My house, the pink one, was literally the second story of a 2-story house on Heights Boulevard that had caught fire, but somehow didn't burn down or even spread to the top half. I mean, honestly, how the fuck does that even happen? Once the fire was out, we straight up chopped the top, plopped it right down next to the charred bottom half, added a front door and a kitchen, and moved right back in. Lived there for many years. Then at some point sliced it in half, trucked it across town, glued it back together, and rented it to me. Shit's wild, right? It was a cute house though, it's still there. It's right next to an overflow lot for the elementary school where people used to play soccer, teach their kids how to ride bikes, and do other random stuff. Sometimes people park there, no one seemed to mind. There really wasn't a good place for guests to park at my house since McKinney is a bus route and blocking the street kind of sucks. There's literally a gate directly into my yard from that lot, and I would park there from time to time to work on my truck or give gas in my driveway or whatever. The more I started to do that though, the more I thought, you know, maybe I should ask the school if it's okay. I like to be cool with my neighbors like that. Well, big fucking mistake. I sent a really nice and carefully worded email to the principal of the school introducing myself as their neighbor and thanking them for letting their community use their lot. No response. I sent another one, no response. I even walked over there one afternoon and they told me to leave. One day the gates were closed and locked and no one got to use that lot anymore. I felt like such a stupid fucking asshole. And I still do. I'm sorry, Eastwood. By the way, I drove by the other day and it's open, so all good, no lessons learned. Anyway, like I said, there was no proper driveway. All the landlord did was plop that top half house with some blocks on an empty lot next to the blue one and dropped a truckload of DG for a driveway. Decomposed granite for those not in the landscaping biz. I just Googled decomposed granite, and the first people also ask is, what are the cons of decomposed granite? Cons. Loose DG will easily erode and become muddy when wet. DG with resin does not provide good drainage. May need to be refilled from time to time, and matching up the exact color may be difficult, which is exactly what happened. Over time, that stuff would wash down into the street, collecting in the gutter and mixing with street sludge and getting all gnarly and nasty. Well, I didn't like that. I mean, like I said, it's a bus line on a high-traffic thoroughfare right in front of my home, and I like to be a good neighbor, you know, when I can. So one day, I went out there with a shovel and started scooping that shit up and trying to tamp it back down in the driveway. It was a total crapshoot. It was half sludge and was never gonna stay put. Looked like shit anyway, but hey, just wanted to get out of the street, you know? Now, people regularly walk their dogs around the elementary school, so I was used to seeing folks across the street. I would wave at them from the porch, exchange the occasional pleasantry, etc. But when I was about halfway through the granite sludge, this lady who I hadn't seen before, very normal looking 40-something white lady, walks by with her dog and yells, "You know it's just gonna end up back down there, right?" A little caught off guard, and I'm like, doing what I can. Some awkward bullshit. She responds, "Everything returns to chaos. It's called entropy, man." Continues on around the schoolyard, never saw her again. Wish I could say that she was the creepy, witchy soothsayer type. But honestly, she was a normal white lady in athleisure wear with an ordinary little yappy dog. They come in all forms, I guess. Just a little shook. I mean, if I didn't already feel like it was a waste of time, I certainly did now, so I stopped, went inside. I still think about that lady sometimes. Think about my dweeby fucking email to the school principal about the parking lot. I think about doing good things, worthwhile things, about how much effort it can take. And I just think about leaving it all alone, about being alone in peace. I mean, moving a whole ass house, half a house, across town seems like a lot of work to me, but people do it. That's a good decade ago. I live across town on the west side now. Blessed to have a real, grown-up, concrete driveway. I still try to do right by my neighbors, even if some of them are assholes.
Earlier today, I heard science writer Dennis Overby on the radio on my way to a birthday party. He was talking about entropy too. Something about time. How we're moving further and further away from the Big Bang and further into disorder. Hell yeah, we are, I said to myself. Sipping my rose soda on my way to my friend's parents' condo swimming pool deck thing. Dennis went on to mention how special it is to exist in this moment. How our decline into chaos is eons old, and it'll continue endlessly until some unknown far-off point in time we'll all be long gone. Our achievements, tragedies, neighborly gestures, cosmically insignificant. I mean, you all listen to NPR, you know the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Of course, I'm paraphrasing. I mean, he's a good writer, I guess, but I'm not trying to just regurgitate his lesson, but I did think about that lady walking her dog around the elementary school and the weird shit she yelled at me. Maybe she heard the same kind of thing and NPR was like yelling it at everybody. Think about living in different arrangements with parents or roommates or lovers. How you have these expectations, ground rules, and then you move out, and then you don't have expectations or ground rules anymore, and you're still friends, or you're not. How your mutual friends might start dating, then break up, or open a bar together, then break up, or start an arts organization together, then break up. Then you either choose sides and wall off one of them, or just let it be a little messy, maybe a little chaotic, and still be friends with everyone, or not. Think about how someone once mentioned how the most stable structure is a pile of rubble. If you can't demolish anything any further, it's as stable as can be, none more stable. I don't have an NPR reference for that one, but I think it was on the back of a 9/11 conversation that I had, if I'm being honest. This probably makes me sound like I'm some kind of poly-anarchist in my soapbox, and I'm not, honest. I'm a square. Overburdened by poorly built, crappy systems and half measures that were never well thought out to begin with. Outdated, failed attempts at businesses and governments in dire need of demolishing and reimagining. Maybe it's okay to let things be a little messy, for a while at least. We should be a little bit more observant and deliberate in how we choose to organize things before disrupting the natural, seemingly chaotic order of things. Maybe we just try different things, knowing that they may not be right, best, or permanent. That's okay. Isn't that how we learn things? I don't know. I bet there's still some decomposed granite in the gutter in front of that house, forcing buses to swerve into oncoming traffic or blocking the storm drain, causing all sorts of issues. Bet that lady still walks by and looks over at it. I still feel pretty good about trying to clean it up. But at the same time, I'm glad she pointed out how it was a complete and utter waste of time. Thanks.
Entropy, I can dig it. Hell yeah. That line about how governments do things, that reminded me of another poem. It's not going to be like the other one. So you guys know Norway, right? What Norway's doing is They're taking all the seeds that are known to mankind, and they're freezing it in some mountain hyperbase, like up by the North Pole, so that when everything dies, we can restart. And this poem was written by a Norwegian making fun of his government for expecting the world to collapse. When hellfire rains from the sky, I'll be safe and sound in my mountainside. Oh, the only safe place for the human race is deep inside my hyperbase. We've got 14 women for every man, so we can populate the world all over again. We've got all kinds of seeds that we may need to start the world a new ecology. Ooh, ecology is what the world will need. With help from the finest eugenicists, all our members have been handpicked. All precaution must be made to preserve the purity of the race. It's Norwegians. We've got our very own army of robotic men that will battle anyone that tries to get in through the door that is 97 inches thick, and the only way it opens is if you sing. La la la, la 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 la, la la la, la la. Completely independent of the sun, we have acres of crops that grow on their own. Inside our vast cavern at our ranch, with horses, cows, and chickens, pigs, and kitty cats. The horses do the plowing, and the pigs give us meat, and cold fusion provides the heat, as we stay vigilant and procreate and wait for our glorious fate. The day when we return will claim the world. Hyperbase, Norway. A little south from Norway is where this next story takes place. It's called Ankles in Tehran, written by Donya Ziraksari and read by Maria Lissaheg.
Better small. Alright. Ankles in Tehran by Donya Ziraksari. The early 2000s were horrible in Iran. There was no freedom, and every move was monitored by a very small percentage of people who were following the regime blindly. They started a guidance patrol, basically the moral police. It was constructed by the government, but they portrayed themselves as a non-government organization. And they mostly registered volunteer people who would patrol the town for sinners. Members of this guidance patrol would wear full Islamic clothing and would patrol the streets, cinemas, parks, and coffee shops, looking for boys and girls hanging out, holding hands, or, God forbid, wearing clothing, makeup, or hairstyles that were unacceptable. We would be stopped and questioned at any time or place, just for incorporating colors in our clothing or for using Western-style behaviors in public. Female members of the guidance patrol program would wear the full black hijab from head to toe, and nothing but their nose was visible. These women would not wax their facial hair and would look scary and unpleasant. They were mean and would give a hard time to whoever was not married or had waxed their facial hair, or were dressed in a way that the guidance patrol deemed to be even slightly immodest or Western looking. Male members of the guidance patrol would wear buttoned up, mostly dark colored shirts with ugly, baggy khaki pants and closed-toe formal shoes. They would button their shirts all the way up to the chin, would not shave any facial hair, and would wear the traditional Islamic cologne made from essence of rose flower or other herbs, as if they bought it from the organic section of Whole Foods. These men would always wear their hair to one side and would play with a prayer bead in their hands as they looked for sinners in the neighborhoods. The guidance patrol would address everyone on the street as sister, brother, holy sister, holy brother. In return, we would address them as, "Holy shit!" as soon as you crossed their path. Makeup was wiped off, hair shoved into the headscarf, and sleeves would roll down. And pretend that you did not know one another. You would deny all relationships with the opposite sex and do exactly as asked in order to avoid arrest. Those were scary times to be in love. If you tried to stand up for yourself, you were arrested and often beaten up in the street. Some families would force their young girls to get married as soon as they graduated from high school, so no one would gossip, and so their daughter would be protected from the guidance patrol. Men definitely had more freedom than women, and it felt unfair. But there were times when men would get arrested, even for having long or Western-style hair, and the police would shave their head, set their hair on fire, and humiliate them in public or at the police station. Couples captured on the street were forced to get married at the police station against their will and in absolute humiliation. I had the pleasure of interacting with the guidance patrol several times. I was stopped once when I was in high school while walking with my mother in Tehran from my uncle's house to the main street to catch the bus to go home. He was a young man standing on the side of the street, staring me down from a distance. He was barely capable of growing a beard and was dressed in a white, ironed, buttoned-up shirt with khaki pants and a baton in his hand. As we were getting closer, my mom asked me to adjust my pants hem, which were folded up to display my young, white ankles. In those days, the style for women who wanted to push some boundaries was to fold up their pants hem to show some ankle. We would even bejewel our ankles by wearing an ankle bracelet. I told her, "What is it going to do to me if I do not? Kill me? I'll gladly die for my freedom." I was young, and with the many revolutions happening here and there, I thought I had to do my part by disobeying their hijab enforcement. My mom shook her head in a disappointed way. Of course, the young guidance patrolman stopped me, saying, "Sister, unfold your pants to cover your ankles." I stopped walking, stared at him for a few short seconds to display my disappointment, pushed out my chest, then, with reluctance, bent over and unfolded my pants to cover my ankles. I looked up and said, "There! Does this make you happy now? Does this solve any major problem in this society?" He said, "No, but thank you. You can go now." I walked away with my mom, filled with hate and revenge. Not too far from him, I stopped on the side of the street and folded my pants up to showcase my sinful ankles and, more importantly, protest for my freedom of expression. Unfortunately, I believe Iran is one of a few countries that has managed to travel backward in time, as it has become more isolated from its neighbors, prejudiced, superstitious, and narrow-minded. It has pressured its citizens for over 40 years to forget its pre-Islamic historical significance, succeeded in becoming much less popular internationally, and has nearly altogether lost its tourism industry. Iran has suffered a brain drain, as many of the people during the past 20 years have emigrated to live healthier lives and to provide better futures for their children. Many religious, social, and political minorities have left Iran in order to practice their beliefs safely. They've had to leave their relatives, homes, friends, and childhood memories behind, though they still carry the hope to go back someday to a better Iran. Many have died hoping the regime would change and that they could be reunited with their loved ones, but I do not know if I will witness this change during my lifetime.
Do you like to dance? The next story is One True Willie, written by Claire McClunnis and read by Ruth Hirsch.
I didn't even make that sound. It does it. Okay. The Botched Ballet Chronicles Part 4, Act 2, Scene 2, One True Willie. I had just broken up with a man monster who I had fondly called the Count up until the time when this story takes place. He and I had always joked about him being vampiric by nature because of his appearance and his habits. He was a creature of the night. And now he had proven himself to be true to his form, the actual Prince of Darkness. His sins were numerous, and it seemed there would be no retribution for his actions against me. This man had wronged me like no one had ever done before or thereafter, and I was livid. Emptiness is loneliness, and loneliness is cleanliness, and cleanliness is godliness, and God is empty, just like me. I shrieked along to the Smashing Pumpkins as Zero blasted through my Honda Civic stereo, and thunder rolled in the distance. A violent storm crept close behind me as I drove to the Miller Outdoor Theater for the Houston Ballet's performance of Giselle. I may have felt the most enraged and vengeful I had ever felt in my life, I thought to myself as I parked in the company parking section, grabbed my bags, then hurried to stage door. For this performance, I played the role of just a regular Willie. Now, please allow me to introduce the character of Willie to you. In the story ballet of Giselle, a young peasant girl, Giselle, falls in love with and becomes secretly engaged to the prince without her knowledge of his royal bloodline or his previous betrothal to another member of the royal court. When the prince's original bride-to-be crashes Giselle in her borrowed man's little tryst, Giselle quickly loses her mind and dies of a broken heart. Now, this is apparently quite a common occurrence because post-haste, the ghosts of other women who had also died of broken hearts at the hands of their lovers coax and guide Giselle's spirit into the forest where she is cursed to spend her afterlife. This gang of vengeful female spirits are the harpies or banshees of the forest, and their title or genus is Willie. The head honcho of their crew goes by the title of Myrta, Queen of the Willies, and she is one evil bitch, witch, and a bitch. To be sure. Men beware, for your worst fate is to cross paths with the likes of Myrta. On a monthly basis, Myrta orders her willies to search for and lure men, usually hunters, into their forest. She then curses these men to dance until their untimely deaths beneath the light of the full moon, shaded by the forest canopy, as the rest of the Willie gang point and laugh and turn their heads away in disgust. They even make a talk to the hand gesture whenever a man begs and pleads for his life before them. It's a pretty good example of that old adage, which goes something like, a woman's worst fear is to be killed by a man, and a man's worst fear is to be made a laughing stock of by a woman, or yet in this case, the ghosts of 18 women. Taking my seat at my place in the women's dressing room, I began the painstaking process of doing my hair for this role. I promise you, I'm not being remotely dramatic when I say that this hairstyle takes almost 45 minutes to complete for each performance, and even longer to undo afterwards. It involves exactly several hair parts, thorough teasing, half a can of liquid hairnet, 4 pin curls, 2 tangible hairnets, 1 bun, 25 bobby pins of 3 different varieties, eyelash glue, and a little white floral hairpiece to top it all off. After all that work, you're left with a hideous, outdated rat's nest of a look called a classical that no one is ever completely satisfied with. With each bobby pin I stuck into my nest came a flash of lightning, followed by a rumble of thunder as the ominous storm loomed ever closer. And I thought about which body part of my ex's I would have rather stuck each pin into. Next came the makeup. Standing over the bathroom sink of the crowded female dressing room, I caked on the communal, chalky white makeup called Pancake, which the entire corps de ballet did. We were meant to use it sparingly, however, on that day, I couldn't give two fucks about what the makeup department or anyone else thought of me for that matter. My mind drifted into memory as I recalled a time not so long ago when I had done a promotional photo shoot for the ballet Dracula, in which I was cast as Dracula's bride. After the shoot, I changed into my street clothes but kept my white body makeup, hair, and plastic glued on fangs intact. I threw a hoodie over my head and drove home in that look, shocking fellow drivers along my route with my morbid appearance. I arrived home, where my then boyfriend, aka the Count, lay asleep in my bed. And like a good friend, she took it upon herself to ensure I keep myself together enough not to get fired or injured. Back at my dressing room station, I stared into the dark pits, which were once the eyes of my own reflection. I had just about used up the last of my black and brown eyeshadows for the singular performance. I had a heavy shadow below my cheekbones and along the contours of my neck and chest to appear as emaciated as possible. I heard they might cancel the show last minute if the weather gets too bad. I overheard a coworker mention to another as she did a double take of me, a concerned grin pasted across her face. I ignored her. I was going to do this show with or without anyone else, company or audience. I recalled reading a biography about the life of Gelsey Kirkland, a famous American ballerina. In it, she talked about her love for the role of Giselle and how she would privately rehearse outside under moonlight to prepare for each performance. Of course, she was also doing a fuck ton of cocaine at the time and being bulimic. So it really wasn't as romantic as the book made it seem. I glued my false eyelashes on, darkened my beauty mark for good measure, and made my way to side stage. Pertinent 10, pertinent 10. Our stage manager called over the backstage speaker. It was time to spray Cutter Deep Woods repellent over every part of our bodies for this outdoor show in the bayou. Surely this spray could be used to also repel a succubus like my ex, and I wondered how badly it would hurt him if I were to spray this poison directly into his eyeballs. Then it was time to get the pink satin coffins on our feet. God, I hope this show gets canceled early, a different coworker muttered. I know there's barely anyone out there in this mess, agreed another, just as a bolt of lightning cracked above our heads, and these God-fearing Christian girls shuddered and sighed with hopelessness. The show would go on. The fog machines began to whir and fill the stage with a haunting mist. As I ritualistically placed my dingy, moth-eaten gray veil over my head, the curtain rose and I made my first entrance onto the stage. Although it was now pouring with rain, the thunder had momentarily subsided, as though to assist in setting the mood for this scene. After the first appearances of the Willie Gang in Mirta and Giselle's solos, the lightning really began to pick up again for the murder of the prince's best friend, Hilarion. My coworkers were phoning it in left and right. Who cared at this point? Even our artistic director and the company staff had abandoned the auditorium and were now casually sitting backstage, drying themselves with paper towels and chatting about the weather. Well, I cared. That's who. For my final entrance, I led my line of Willie's soldiers onto the stage with unbridled fury. No one cared, which to me meant that I could overact my ass off without fear of any consequences. I locked eyes with the prince, who was a mere mortal dancer and hadn't so much as even met my ex the Count. I pointed my finger at his heart like a dagger. You disgusting, filthy leech, I hissed at him under my breath. No one could hear me over the music and the roar of thunder. At another moment, I threw my head back and cackled just before his imminent demise. It was possible that I had never felt more at one with nature and the universe than at that time. Dancing the empty cavern of my heart out on stage during this rageful storm while no one watched. Then the clock bells tolled 6, and dawn quickly approached the forest of the willies. The evil forces which governed the willies died, only to be reanimated once more the following month, or in our company's case, on tour later that season. In the wake of the storm which the Count had unleashed upon my life, I spent many years attempting and failing to forgive him for his trespasses against me. Friends of mine who were spiritually inclined, or holier than thou, would often remind me of the old adage which goes something like, being hateful is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I contemplated forgiveness throughout countless sleepless nights, with nothing but my own thoughts as my companions. I hoped for forgiveness. I perhaps even prayed for it once or twice, but it never came to me. In place of forgiveness came existential dread. It was clear that I could not forgive or forget, and I have been bathing in my rage ever since the day in which this story took place. Perhaps I'm just not quite of this world enough for the human ability of forgiveness. Cue musical score of Giselle by Adolf Adam!
Wow. Okay, people, we're here. The final story of the night. Thank you so much for spending your Tuesday evening with us. Marcia, written by Daniel Oliver and read by Chris Skelton.
Hello. The end. Oh wait. Marcia by Daniel Oliver. I was busy trying to stuff a pair of dismembered arms in a hefty bag when there was a knock on the door. It was probably my DoorDasher with my medium-spiced pad thai and 4 dumplings. I liked medium spice because it still offered enough of a kick without overheating my sensitive palate. And 4 dumplings because 3 wasn't enough. 6 was too many, and only a monster would order dumplings in odd numbers. The knock startled me. Not because I wasn't expecting it, but because I had been jumpy all night. It all started when I turned on the news earlier that day and saw that a patient from a psychiatric hospital had escaped. The authorities were searching but hadn't apprehended him yet. Because it was Halloween, parents were urged to be extra watchful while trick-or-treating with their children that night. I faintly recall the news reporting that he was a big, hulking bear of a man wearing what police suspected was a John F. Kennedy Halloween mask. I think they also said he was armed with an axe and considered to be extremely dangerous or something like that. I'm honestly not too sure because I was only half paying attention. My mind was preoccupied with something far scarier than some cosplaying hospital escapee. The movie Chucky. I watch it every Halloween night. It's a tradition. I always watch it alone, too, since I tend to yelp at all the scary parts, and I don't want to publicize that I startle easier than a souffle. Usually, I have to watch it alone in my room, but
This year, my roommate was out of town and on a business trip, so I didn't have to seclude myself. Since the news was so woefully uninteresting, I decided to start the movie early. I ordered my Thai food, snuggled into my favorite pair of Thai food eating sweatpants, and settled in for my annual dose of stabby munchkins. For the first half of my movie, my focus was unwavering. But just as the second act was getting underway, I noticed that a particular building in one of the scenes looked kind of familiar. It wasn't long after that I was thinking about ultra-realistic silicone sex dolls. Obviously, I didn't just make a random jump from, hey, that warehouse looks familiar, to life-size fuckable Barbies. There was a logical path in that line of thinking, and that path starts with my roommate, Wayne. Wayne had a busy job that kept him traveling all the time. He loved the work, but it had its downsides, particularly in the romance department. It wasn't so bad that he couldn't find time for the occasional hookup, but for the past couple of years, those occasions were fewer and farther in between. Since Wayne wasn't willing to cut back his hours to find a more substantive relationship, he did the next best thing. He purchased a $7,000 ultra-realistic sex doll from some sketchy warehouse down by the docks. Some sketchy warehouse that looked exactly like the one in the movie Chucky. The second I associated Wayne's sex doll with Chucky, the night was ruined. It was all I could think about. I could feel the sex doll, which Wayne had named Marcia, by the way, from behind his bedroom door. Over and over, I imagined Marcia coming to life just like Chucky, kicking down Wayne's bedroom door and slashing my throat. I had no choice. Marcia had to go. But how was I supposed to get rid of a 100-pound humanoid sperm dumpster? I was going to have to chop Marcia up, stuff her into hefty bags, and drive her to the dump. It was the only way to make sure she could never kill. Thankfully, her limbs were designed to snap on and off easily. But her head and torso were one big piece that wouldn't fit in a bag without being separated first. I remember the sales guy giving us an anatomy lesson about Marcia when I went with Wayne to pick her up. She had an interchangeable mouth and vagina. She was the base model, but you could upgrade to the one that included an interchangeable butthole. Wayne was a man of modest sensibilities, however, so he respectfully declined the deluxe butthole edition. The head was connected to the torso via a flexible metal rod in the neck that looked surprisingly like a human spine. I was sure that if I hit it in the right spot with something sharp, I could decapitate Marcia with ease. I just didn't have anything sharp. And even if I did, I wasn't sure I possessed the strength to hack all the way through. But I would cross that bridge when I got there. I had just begun to shove Martha's arms in a hefty bag when the knock on the door came. I dropped the trash bag full of body parts and did a happy little jig on my way to collect my medium spiced Thai food and socially acceptable manner of dumplings. Number of dumplings. When I opened the door, however, it wasn't the door dasher with my food. Rather, it was a mountain of a person wearing a Kennedy mask and holding an axe by his side. I gasped and stumbled back a step. Could this be the escaped psychiatric patient I heard about on the news? I was just about to call the authorities, but then I stopped. I remembered the news saying the escaped patient was wearing a John F. Kennedy Halloween mask. Upon closer inspection, this person was clearly wearing a Robert F. Kennedy Halloween mask. Although the faces were identical, John F. Kennedy had brown hair, whereas Robert F. Kennedy had a slightly lighter shade of brown hair. Only a complete moron could confuse the two. So I was certain the person currently filling the entirety of my doorway was just a harmless trick-or-treater. Unfortunately, I didn't have any candy, but I didn't want to send the poor guy away empty-handed, so I invited him inside while I looked for some cookies. Or canned goods. Or a handful of pennies from the junk drawer, or something. I briefly considered explaining why I had several trash bags full of body parts strewn about my house, but I didn't want him to think I was a weirdo, so I just pretended they weren't there at all. I was putting together a trick-or-treat goodie bag of canned pinto beans, spare change, and an old Limp Bizkit CD I'd found in a drawer, when I was struck by an idea. I could just ask this trick-or-treater if he would be nice enough to lop the head off of Marcia before he left. After all, he did have an axe with him, and it looked real. Although it could have just been a good-looking prop, he even had realistic-looking blood painted on the blade. I was vague about the reasons for why I needed to dispose of Marcia. I knew the idea of a sex doll coming to life to murder me in my sleep was preposterous. So, to secure his help without making him think I was some nut job, I just told him I needed her out of my home for deeply personal reasons that I did not wish to discuss. Thankfully, he didn't ask any follow-up questions. In fact, he never said anything at all. Just kind of stood there, breathing heavily under his RFK mask, loosely holding his axe by his side. I dragged Marcia's torso out to the living room and explained in painstaking detail about how similar the metal rod in Marcia's neck was to a human neck. I pointed out exactly where I thought he should strike to sever her head. I even went as far as to grab the head of his axe and hold it up to my own neck at the exact spot where I thought would yield a one-chop serving. You look really strong, so it should be like cutting through butter for you, I said. And when you're done, we can stuff her into these trash bags and take her to the dump where she'll never be seen again. Even if she's reported missing, there's no way they'll find her in that dump. It's the size of a small city. There's an unlimited number of places to hide a body like this. It's perfect. Plus, no one even goes down there, so you don't even have to worry about being seen. Oh, and don't worry about making too much noise. I don't have any neighbors for miles. I turned my back to the trick-or-treater, knelt beside Marcia's torso, and resumed trying to bend her arms into one of the hefty bags. On the wall ahead of me, I saw the shadow of the trick-or-treater's arms loom overhead as he hoisted the axe into the air. And just before he brought the axe head down, I smiled and thought about how lucky I was to live in a community where people still offered to help strangers in need. You don't see very much of that going around these days. The end.
room earlier, doesn't matter which gender, and you left your phone in there, we have it at the bar. Okay, everybody, let's give everybody a round of applause. Thank you so much. That's it. We'll see you next month. Your phone's at the bar. So,